Get Involved Referee is brought to you by Pressbox PR. Pressbox PR puts your brand on the map. From a chat over a pint to the headline of a website, Pressbox PR takes your brand and gives it the recognition that it deserves. With a proven track record with multiple clients, you'll be able to see your press go beyond the box with Pressbox PR. Check out pressboxpr.co.uk for more information. Hello and welcome to Get Involved Referee with Steve Conroy, Des Roach and myself, Lindsay Heron. Well, we did predict it was going to be rather exciting for you in Edinburgh, fellows, and I'm not just talking about the Fringe, I'm talking about Easter Road. We'll come to that in just a moment. Some very interesting games actually across the SPFL, loads of things to talk about in this episode. And we'll also touch on the sort of social activities of one of the leading members of the SFA when he might in fact have been covering one of the more important matches. Let's start with that important game. First, of course, Hibs against Rangers. Steve, you called it. You said it was going to be a bit chaotic. And my goodness, you were right.
What a soothsayer I am. Yeah, I couldn't have predicted it would be quite as event-packed as it turned out to be. And we were talking about how, not to beat about the bush, how boring last weekend was. But that just shows you it doesn't last long in Scottish football. What a weekend.
No, absolutely. It's back with a bang.
Let's deal with it chronologically before we get your assessment overall on Willie Collum's performance. The first major talking point is penalty incident that Hibs may have got midway through the first half. James Tavernier appears to have a right good grip of Rocky Bushiri, and Big Paul Hanlon's jumping behind him as the ball comes into the box. What was your view on that one, Steve?
Well, Des and I are going to disagree slightly on this one. In my opinion, that was a penalty. And I know the arguments about Hanlon not maybe being behind Tavernier. Did somebody else have a hold of Tavernier? But what you can certainly say is that Tavernier had more than a handful of the Hibs player and dragged them down. That, for me, was a penalty. On its own merits, I think that's a penalty. But when you compare it to what happened later on, that's 3 or 4 penalties.
Yeah, I think consistency, when you look at the way the events unfolded, I'm not disagreeing with Steve by saying I don't think so. I actually do. I think there's enough force and enough contact, to use a word that Steve used, mitigating. Hanlon, was maybe holding Tavernier to purchase and get a bit higher, but there was certainly enough of Tavernier grabbing a hold of Bashiri to really make it a questionable decision. If the penalty had been given, I would have absolutely
nobody would have said a thing.
No complaints at all. Don't think anybody could have had any complaints at all if the penalty had been awarded.
And then just before half time, the big moment of the first half, Bushiri involved again. He has a tug or a pull at Antonio Cholak, who goes tumbling to the turf. Penalty, says Willie.
And wrongly. You said push, pull, whatever. There was contact. He touched him. He didn't pull him, didn't push him, didn't shove him, punch him. There's no, as far as I'm aware, unless they've changed it, there is no law that says that if you touch or attempt to touch somebody, that counts as a direct free kick. He touched him. There was nowhere near enough force to send him tumbling. A fit, healthy, athletic young man like that goes down with that kind of touch. He needs to see somebody professionally if that's the case.
I agree wholeheartedly. Touch, probably even been light, he's brushed against them. Callachan goes down. Now, what you've also got to look at is what's the opportunity for either of them to play the ball? Bashiri's never going to get it.
No.
Callachan's never going to get it. The ball's been played at quite a decent pace. It's only going one place and it's going straight through to David Marshall in goals. But Steve quite alludes to, why is Callachan going down? To me, that's diving. And if you're diving, that's cheating. So Callachan should be the one getting a yellow card for simulation because there is not enough force or pulling, whatever you want to call it, because it wasn't a pull. It was just a drop. I would say Callachan has dropped to the ground. It is not a penalty kick.
By extension, I don't know what they're going to do about that now, but if the SFA come out and say, if anybody comes out and says that that's a justifiable penalty, then every corner, every incident, every time there's a cross in the box, it's going to be a penalty. Because how many times do you see that? Every single time.
Well, that's what Lee Johnson said after the game. He was quite insistent that, every time a corner comes in, like you say, wee bit of pulling, pushing, grabbing, it's got to have to be a spot kick.
Has to be.
Football's a contact sport. You are going to come into contact with someone. You're going to be running at pace. You're going to be jumping. You're going to be coming together. It's not a blinking penalty kick. Let's just cut it there. He got it wrong.
So in that instance then, say when VAR comes in, whenever it comes in, we're assuming it's going to be after the World Cup, but we're not sure. Would that be a clear and obvious decision that was made wrong by the referee that could be overturned by VAR?
In my opinion, that's clear and obvious. Yep. Absolutely.
I would like to think so.
Yeah.
So
If it's not brought in for that, then what's it there for?
So they would have jumped in and say, "Hey, Willie, have a look at it.
Have a look at that.
This
Yeah.
again."
Well, that's bearing in mind that the person who's operating VAR for that game has got the gumption to say, "No, Willie,
yeah,
you need to look at this," because we all know there are certain people won't have the wherewithal to do that. But in my opinion, yeah, that's got to be reviewed. It's there for factual evidence, and factual evidence is that's not a penalty.
Not a penalty. Not in a million years.
Okay, so that's mistake number 1 from Willie Collum, as you put it quite coherently. The second big one, of course, is the challenge on John Lundstrom. Everyone and their granny's been having a talk about this one over the weekend since it happened. First of all, it's a foul for sure, and he knows exactly what he's doing, Steve.
Of course he does. How many times have you seen it? He's taking one for the team, a professional foul, whatever you want it. And what we've seen now is he's breaking up a transitional move. He took one deliberately to stop the move. He knew he was getting a booking.
Yep.
He'd done it with the sole intention of getting a booking.
Yep.
Astonished when
Do
he
you know
brought
what?
out the red card.
The manager would be delighted to give away a yellow card at that point in time. As Steve's right, you're taking one for the team, you're stopping play. It's a good foul.
If you don't make that foul, your team makes their bollock you.
Yep, absolutely. So bring it down, kill play, reset, free kick, get on with it.
Well, you could see the incredulity on Lundstrom's face and the Rangers players reacting the way they did, saying they couldn't understand Willie's decision in that instance. And he was very quick to pull out the card as well, Steve, I thought.
He's always prone to that. That's what he does. He goes diving in. But he was just, I don't know what he saw, but whatever he saw, it was wrong. And I'd just like to point out the first player in on it was our friend, Mr. Porteous.
Never one to miss a bit of confrontation, Des, is he?
No, he's the gift that keeps on giving for Scottish football, isn't he? Or certainly for our show.
us too.
Yeah, for us too. I think what probably makes it more incredulous is the fact that he gave Jake Doyle-Hayes a yellow card after 25 minutes for pretty much a copycat foul. He's just broke up play, yellow card. Managers, players, everyone accepts it. But for a red card, I mean, you looked at Lundstrom's face. Lundstrom was almost dropping dead. He was like, what the is going on here?
Okay,
and as you say, Willie he's obviously made up his mind instantaneously because that red card was out. Quick draw McGraw, that was there.
Oh, that was instantly, yeah.
But it's never and I know Rangers have appealed it, and I would expect that to be a successful appeal.
But the point is that they lost the player, took them down to 10 men. We'll talk about the the next one in a moment. But that puts them under pressure right away when you lose a man, Steve.
Absolutely, and it puts you under pressure when it's a merited red card, but when it's an undeserved one, all the more so. Now, I don't, I'm not saying anything that maybe millions of people wouldn't say anyway. I would have suspected that Rangers would still have won it with 10 men, but it's still not fair on them, and it happens to lots of other people. It's not fair that they're down to 10 men for something that wasn't their fault.
And of course, in typical fashion, an almost identical situation manifested itself down at St James's Park. 24 hours later, Kieran Trippier clearly fouls Kevin De Bruyne. The referee, Jared Gillett, I'm not quite sure what the pronunciation is.
I'm not sure. No.
I hope I don't do him a disservice. Flashes the red card, VAR comes in, gets involved, and he changes it to yellow.
But do you know what? Everyone's praising that because it's the right decision. So he's taken advice from whoever's on VAR duty at that moment in time. He's went across, he's made his initial decision, he's went across, looked at it. That's what we're saying. It should be there for correct, proper facts. And that's how it was used to the right effect. Newcastle remained 11 on the park. They get a well-deserved draw, earning a point. Rangers, they were put straight under the cosh. We're going down to 10 men for the last half hour. It was unfair in Rangers.
That's what VAR's there for. And, aptly named Mr. Tripper. But it's there, it's for fact, it's instant. Sent the boy off. He was called over to look at it straight away, decided straight away it was wrong, downgraded it, free kick, let's move on. And there was a couple of Man City gripes, and then they just thought, go on, mate.
No.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, we come to our old friend Alfredo Morelos, who's been a bit of a poster boy for controversial decisions in Scottish football in his 5 years here. They thought he'd calmed down a little bit, actually, in recent times. He hadn't been the subject of too many, let's say, controversial incidents. But my goodness, he came back with a bang at Easter Road, Steve.
I can't believe some of the excuses that were being made up from that. There was absolutely no excuse for that. That was petulant. He acted like a brat. He was totally unacceptable. And let's not forget, I know some people are trying to say it wasn't as bad. He'd done the boy twice. He knew exactly what he was doing. That was nasty. It was vicious. And he got what he deserved.
He seemed to reach for him first, didn't he, Des? And then could come in with a heavier kind of swing.
Yeah, he was almost getting a marker first to sort of see where he was. Right, I know where he is. Now, the guy's 6 foot odd that he's playing against. Why are you flinging your arm out like that? Now, Was it the fact came out today that Morelos is apparently now Rangers' most ordered off player in history, apparently. Now, he's only been at the club for, 5 years? John Gregg was there for how long and never accumulated that, if that fact is correct. But no, he's let his teammates down big style because they're already down to 10 men. I know it was later on in the game, but they're already under pressure by having 10 men. For him flinging his arm out like that, in that manner, you would be absolutely raging if you were hanging on, if you're a Rangers player. And I hope Van Bronckhorst throws the book at him because he's just let everyone down, himself down. He's trying to come back after being injured for a number of months. So he just put himself out for another 3 games.
Sadly, and you're saying he should have let himself down, but he was laughing when it was done. Actually laughing at it. I don't know what's going on in his head.
To be fair, Willie got that one right.
You got that one right, yep.
Exactly. I think Willie Johnson, 6 red cards back in the old days.
Was it?
And it was hard to get sent off in the old days. You had to be just a bit mug somebody, didn't you, really?
Well, in John Gregg and Billy McNeil's day, they could take hatchets to each other and get a yellow.
You get the first one free, don't you?
But 8 red cards. Well, he hadn't been sent. I'm not trying to defend Morelos in any shape or form, but he hadn't been sent off for nearly 3 years, 2.5 years. Celtic Park, second yellow for diving in an Old Firm game. So, but this was just madness, like you say. I mean, you could see the Rangers bench reaction. They can't believe what's going on. And Tavernier was absolutely spitting mad at the end of it all because he knew how much it cost the team.
Rightly so.
Yeah, they got the draw because of him.
Yeah, Hibs him back into the game, but I just don't know. I was going to say I don't know what he was thinking. He's obviously not thinking. That's the issue, isn't it?
Or worse, he probably was thinking, but we don't want to go down that.
No.
Don't want to go down that route.
I know we're here to talk about referees, but I mean, this is a major issue for Rangers, isn't it now? And what does Gio Van Bronckhorst do? This guy is out of contract at the end of the season. The window closes in just over a week's time. He can't play in the next 2 domestic matches. Does he even use him in PSV and try and attract a suitor? I mean, it's quite remarkable, isn't it?
Aye, all told chaos that he's caused by that. If it was me, I know what I'm like. I wouldn't be playing him again. Whether I could get shot of him or not, I wouldn't be playing him again. I
don't think the club will look at it. The club will look at it as this is a saleable asset to them. So you either get him to sign or you punt him before Christmas. Personally speaking, I think he's a liability for the team. I know you're saying he's not been sent off for a couple of years, but probably been injured for half of that time as well. But no, I would go with Callachan up front and put my faith in him.
I agree. So like shown he's a much better player. And you can't, it's clearly been shown that you can't talk therapy out of whatever's wrong with him. He's just a liability.
Well, he's 26 now, Steve, isn't it? It's not as if he's a kid anymore.
No, he's as grown up as he's going to get. And if he's still got that in him, it's too much of a liability. That's going to come out at any time.
He's been in our game. I was going to say he's been in our game for a few years, but that wouldn't be tolerated. Doesn't matter whether you're in England, Italy or France. It's a red card all the time. So I don't think you're going to talk that out of him. I think that'll just be part of his persona and the way he plays football. In some ways, I suppose that took the limelight partially off the referee, but he's certainly getting it in the neck from a lot of quarters. I mean, in all seriousness, how bad was that performance from Willie, and what are the ramifications in your view?
I think I don't want to speak too badly, but that's as bad a performance as I can remember from Willie. And he has been prone to erratic performances, but that was just that was just bad. For our most senior, most decorated referee to come out with that was just it was a really, really bad day. Now he has that was his 3rd Premier game. There's been talking points in all 3 of them so far. Does he maybe need a rest? Being euphemistic? I think that like everyone, now I'm not calling for Willie to retire, if that's only something that he can decide. I think that like any player, the shelf life is maybe coming towards the end. There are more errors cropping up within matches. Now there's a few major ones in a massive game so early in the season. I think that Willie's experience should have been enough to get him through that game, but I just think that there's more and more small errors. And as Steve said there, 3 games in, there's not one game went by where there's not been a talking point. So I think it's maybe coming to the latter part of his career.
It will be interesting to see if he's on the list for the next round of fixtures and indeed the following weekend. So we'll keep an eye on that.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. And I know I've got my own thoughts on what would have happened to myself and Des in the same situation, but it'll be interesting to see where he's officiating.
I'd be on the EasyJet website looking for a flight, looking for a holiday for a couple of weeks. I think they'll stick with him. I
suspect they will as well.
I think they'll support him, and maybe further along the line, maybe you see him dip into a couple of lower games. But I think if they don't back him, then that sends a big signal if they don't back him.
But some of the things that, and we've talked about it there, if they come out and, I'm not saying anything beyond it, if they come out and say that his decisions were right, if he comes out and says that the Rangers penalty was correct, I think that leads to bedlam. And if they come out and say, and I don't think they will, but the Lundstrom red card was a red card. And again, it's chaos.
It sets a very, very dangerous precedent if that happens.
While all the bedlam and chaos was going on at Easter Road, you'd have thought that someone with a vested interest would be perhaps watching that game, either on television or in the stands. However, it transpires that the head of referees, Crawford, Allan, was playing golf on Saturday, lads, and not enjoying the thrills and spills of Hibs against Rangers.
I don't know what kind of contract that he's, I was going to say phrase, I don't know what kind of contract Crawford's negotiated for himself. But he's the head of refereeing. There's some bloody big games going on that we knew were going to throw up incident in inverted commas. And again, whatever he's negotiated, fair play to him, but he should have been on duty on a day like that. He should have been at a game, or he should have been sitting somewhere where people could be phoning him and discussing things with him.
I agree wholeheartedly. Now, if your job is head of refereeing operations, then the season's up and running. The season is operational at this moment in time. So you know the fixtures. You know that's a Glasgow-Edinburgh derby for both teams involved, or well, 4 teams involved.
Yep.
You've got to beat a game. Now, I know there's an observer there. How many times in previous incumbents, if that game's on, Rangers versus Hibs or Hibernian versus Rangers, Crawford's from Edinburgh, so it's not too far a travel, I wouldn't have thought. You've got to be at the game. Also, you've got to be visual. You've got to be seen, to be out and about in the refereeing and the public and the clubs. Know you're there. You're the one that you're answerable to at the end of the day. Don't know, maybe he's needing a handicap before the end of the golf season, but they should have been. Everybody's allowed time off, but that's for the summer. Season started.
That's his job.
Yes.
I mean, Carnoustie's on the open rota. You know, it's a very good golf course. It's a tough test of golf. Sure, Crawford was honing his skills.
It was a tough test of a game for Willie.
Assuming he must have had a tranny in his bag.
maybe he's got the Sky player or BT player and he's just strapped on and he's watching it as he goes round. But I think that's pretty poor.
I think that's pretty poor as well.
Pretty poor.
It is really astonishing. I find it quite remarkable because you think the first thing that the head of referees would do would go to a game every week and make sure his men are doing their jobs.
I think exactly the same. Yeah, that's your job. And as you say though, you're allowed time off, but you're allowed time off when it's not the football season. The players don't pick and choose which weekend they're. Ange, I'm just going to go for a game of golf on Saturday. Is that all right? I no bother. No, the season's up and running. That's your work.
Because presumably he'll have to firefight a little bit on this Willie Collum issue just now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's got a lot of work on his hands. Because, and just for the exact things that we're talking about, the consequences of their decisions coming up could be huge.
Monday morning, his phone would be off the hook, wouldn't it? It would just be red hot. Become constant. So I'm not going to even try and come up with an excuse for him. If you're the head of refereeing, you go to a game on a Saturday. And whether that be Bonnyrigg Rose against whoever in the Lowland League, or you go to the top SPL game, you've got to be there. And certainly, if it was me and Hibs are playing Rangers on a Saturday lunchtime kickoff, that's the game I'm at.
Not only that, I mean, we'll just discuss just now, there were big moments across the entire Premiership at the weekend, not necessarily just the Hibs Rangers game, which was the earlier kickoff. I mean, he could have taken in 2 games, for goodness sake. He could have got another one, couldn't he?
It's not unknown.
Hibs Rangers on the Saturday, Celtic Hearts on the Sunday.
But even Hibs Rangers was 12:30. He could have jumped in the car and caught the second half of another one.
So 3 games at the weekend. Yeah.
Listen, let's look at, if you don't mind, the rest of the Premiership games. And Ross County Kilmarnock was one that jumped out at me, guys. 2 horrific challenges in there from Ross Callachan of Ross County. And he was remarkably, he wasn't punished for the way he should have been. Is that correct?
That single tackle was the worst challenge of the weekend, but also one of the worst challenges. I'm not even going to call it a tackle, because a tackle implements that you're actually trying to win the ball. That was just thuggery. Absolutely. He's very, very lucky that the Kilmarnock boy didn't come away with a serious injury. It's horrendous. It's vicious. It's absolutely, can't describe it. And I know he did eventually get red carded, but that alone has got to be looked at.
I said, yeah, straight red. No debating whatsoever. But the only debate, I think, in it, we said it, where it was, it's not just the referee shout, that's the 4th official and the assistant referee. Somebody, in the perfect angle, somebody must have seen that.
The person with the best angle is the 4th official. Now, the assistant referee is obviously got to be concentrating on what's going on in the field of play, offside. Is it going to be a quick transition? But the 4th official is there to manage the area around them and offer support to the referee. The 4th official's got to the referee will take a large proportion of the blame for it. But the 4th official, and likewise with the next one, again, right in front, Jack Baldwin tackle. The 4th official is culpable for both of them for me.
Same discussions. Unless there was something going on that we didn't see, with somebody talking to him, were they discussing a substitution? We don't know that, so we're maybe speaking out of turn a bit, but it certainly didn't look as though anything was happening. And in which case, it's the perfect territory for the 4th official.
You've seen both Derek McInnes and Tony Docherty jump out.
Uh-huh.
So if he was distracted, it must have been by the Ross County bench. But Ross County are under pressure at that moment in time. So I don't know. We might be wrong. He may have been getting caught up in something. But it's in absolutely prime territory for the fourth official to make that call.
But it's just lucky that Ryan Alebiosu didn't get seriously injured in that kind of scissor motion.
Oh, it was a shocker. Absolute shocker. The first movement could have done his ankle. The scissor movement could have done his knee. It was a horrible thing. And again, he's got history, but he should be ashamed of himself for that.
To give a yellow is actually worse because it means that you've actually seen something, but you don't deem it enough to be a red card. How can it not be a red card? If you're given a yellow, then you know that something pretty bad's went off there. No, honestly, folk I've had conversations with, everyone is just appalled.
And David Monroe also missed, like you say, the Baldwin challenge on Kerr McEnroy, which was, he lost possession of the ball and smashed in and just about killed him.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe it wasn't quite as bad as Callachan, but it was, euphemistically speaking, it was on the same ballpark. And you knew what he was going to do. It was that typical one where the first touch isn't particularly great and the second touch is a leg breaker.
It's a lunge. A lunge over the ball. Lucky that, again, both Kilmarnock players, thankfully, have walked away relatively injury-free from it, but...
Two straight reds,
two major decisions.
So 2 big mistakes there from David, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
St Johnstone Aberdeen, Andy Considine, an absolute Don stalwart, playing against his old team. Was he lucky to stay in the park, Des? Because it looks like there was a situation where he should have copped 2 yellows in that one.
I never really seen, probably caught him out, I never really seen it. I know we've spoke about it. If he's kicked out, well, he's done the block for the first one. And
but he wasn't booked for that?
He wasn't cautioned for that.
For blocking Vicente Buzayan, which is normally a yellow card, isn't it?
Yeah, but depending, you could set your stall out that you're going to put the bar particularly high, and the first instant where normally that could be a yellow, and I think it probably should have been a yellow, but you're setting out the saying that this is a game, I'm going to let things go, it's going to have to be something worse than that before I start cautioning. That could have been his tactic from the beginning. If it works for you, it works, but it looks as though
it's a dangerous game.
Got away with it.
It's a dangerous game because if you are setting the bar so high, things then can creep in, and it's quite easy to miss a second yellow card. If you caution eventually, then you've already missed one. So he is playing a bit of a dicey game. And
like you say, he was booked for quite a bad challenge on Buzayan later on in the game. Might have been red. Potentially, it was quite a nasty one, but it was just only yellow, so he stayed on for the game, and although St Johnstone ended up losing to a fantastic free kick. Conversely, in the Celtic Hearts game, just jumping to the Sunday, 2 Hearts players get second yellows to end up being sent off right at the death of the game. One of which I think you feel is fair enough, but maybe the Tony Sibic one was a little bit harsh.
The first one, no arguments. That was
Alec Cochrane.
Yeah, that was 2. The repeated haulbacks that he did for the first one, straight, not a problem. And the second one, he tackled on the thigh, between the thigh and the hip. Not a problem with that at all. And to be fair, the player didn't.
No,
he knew what was coming. I think for the second one, was it Sibic?
Tony Sibic, yeah.
Sibic. You could have got it was a push. Nothing worse than a push. Not everything. I hate to say the same things as pundits, but not everything's a foul. Not every foul's a caution. That could have been dealt with differently. That he could have got away with a talking to. He could have just had a word with him on the way past. He decided that it was a caution. It was a cautionable offence. Again, it'd have been a soft one, but he could have got away with not sending him off for that one.
Yeah, I think the Cochrane one, there's no debate in it. I think the second yellow card, if I was the Hearts manager, Robin Nielsen, I'd be more disappointed he made the tackle.
Yeah,
because it was out in the far touchline. It was Callum McGregor, who's left-footed, who's just going to turn back into the pitch. That was avoidable. But as soon as he's made the challenge, then yeah, you've got to support it.
Absolutely.
It's a caution. The second one, Sibic, he'd been cautioned earlier for sort of standing on somebody's foot, hadn't he?
Yeah.
That one there, I know Celtic were making a fast breakaway. It was still in their own half. He's almost like as if he's tried to jump back to avoid contact. He's put his hands out. Not the worst foul in the world. I think he's given it, and I can understand it. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think if he'd avoided it and maybe just ran by him or ran by the captain and said, look, he's got no more life left, I think it could have been managed a lot better, and I don't think anyone would complain really if that one had been avoided.
I don't think it's like people might have passed comment, but I think you could quite easily, in somebody Kevin's class, he could quite easily have got away with just giving them a warning.
Just ignore it.
Public or personal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's actually a really big mistake in the Motherwell Livingston game as well, unfortunately, and it was Nick Walsh in charge of that one. But in mitigation for him, it wasn't he who made the decision. Ball coming in to the back post, Sean Goss goes up with a header, and it's judged that it's hit Christian Montaro on the hand, and he gives the penalty kick. But it was on the basis of the assistant.
Yeah, it was clear that it wasn't Nick's shout. Nick wasn't indicating anything. Nope. He showed no urgency in what he was doing. He was getting ready to disappear up towards the halfway line, and you could clearly see him touching his ear. That was the AR's call, and it was a wrong call. Yeah,
unfortunately, you could see Nick's body language alone. There was that delay in giving decision, and then when you see the camera from behind, you actually hear him saying penalty and pointing to the spot. I don't think Nick would have been happy to take that call, to be honest.
No, he obviously wasn't convinced enough that he was going to go with his own instinct. I mean, you see the position of it. He more had a view of the back, and the AR was looking straight in on it. But Nick knew, I think that there's no think, he knew that it hit his chest. He knew it hadn't hit his arm. But if the AR in a better viewing position says, no, it's definitely a handball, I think you have to go with it.
Yeah, it's got to be the assistant referee we used to say, don't tell me what you think, tell me facts. So he's obviously sold him enough saying, no, this has definitely struck his arm, which quite clearly it did not.
Yeah, you can see from the replay that it's caught him in the chest or just the top of the stomach type thing, albeit his arm's out, but didn't actually hit his arm at all.
No. And everybody's so fixated on the making yourself big and the unnatural position. That's all anybody's looking at. But before it's unnatural, it has to actually hit you.
Yeah, the boy just lifted his arm to get out the road of it.
Yeah, hit his chest and out's a corner.
And Davy Martindale, in fairness to him, kept his cool pretty well, as did Van Bronckhorst actually after the game. He was fairly calm and collected after the decisions went against him, because sometimes, as we've discussed, referees have gone off their heads when these decisions go against them. Managers go off their head.
You're probably right first time as well. But
it's not to say they didn't go off their head inside. What they've done is they've kept their calm in front of the media, which was great. But that's not to say that inside or...
But that's as it should be.
That's exactly. We've said it often enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep it out of the media and deal with it like men and on your own.
But we've said both incumbents at Celtic and Rangers are calmer than previous guys. And I don't think Martindale's one that's really...
No.
He calls it as it is, but I don't think he's one that's said much out of turn.
So that was a penalty that was given and shouldn't have been. And there was one up at Tannadice actually, which I feel should have been given. You guys have had a look at it. It's a handball again. Aziz Bahish of Dundee United trying to block a header coming in from Ryan Strain, but not given.
It's a penalty.
I think it's a penalty too.
We've seen it numerous times this season, both in England and up here. In fact, St Mirren won a couple of weeks ago at Love Street. The Dundee United player's arm clearly makes himself bigger, struck his arm. St Mirren claimed for it, didn't get it, and thankfully they went on to win the game, and that had no bearing effect on it. But yeah, it was a penalty kick for me.
Yep, I agree. Yep, no question.
But that's the thing, it didn't affect the outcome. St Mirren were comfortable 3-0 winners, whereas Livingston have lost 3 points at Fir Park, which could be quite important to them at the end of it all. But these are the things that these clubs have to deal with at times.
Yep, hopefully the era of VAR will change it. I still don't change the fact that VAR should have been in already for us to be looking at these things rather than looking at it next week, because it doesn't matter. Livingston have been done.
Well, Steve,
it doesn't matter if they get the proper call next week.
So if this penalty incident at Livingston occurs on the 31st of December, but then on the 1st of January, VAR's in, it's a completely different game. The leagues are different. Managers, we've said it before, this relies on managers' jobs, players still being at a club, etc. It's ludicrous.
There's some chat that, because of so many decisions went the wrong way, let's say, that the standard of the refereeing the weekend was really bad, really low. Do you think that's just unfortunate, or do you think that there were some poor performances across the board?
Well, you can't argue with the fact that there were some poor performances. Does that indicate that standards have suddenly dropped from last week, or that were in crisis? No, it doesn't. That could be a really bad day at the office for everybody, and we've all had it. Now, if that goes on next week, and then the week after, and then the week after that, then you have to have a serious think. This time last week, we were sitting here drumming our fingers. We couldn't think of anything to talk about. And we weren't saying that everybody was brilliant last week. So let's see what happens. It wasn't a good weekend. There's no disguising that fact. But a single event doesn't mean it's a trend. So hopefully it isn't a trend, and it's just one of the things.
I mean, last week there was nothing to talk about, and we were praising the referees because there was nothing to talk about. We've got to back that up. Conversely, as much as we're here to try and talk them up, and you can't hide from errors that were they were seeing at the weekend there. But it's not showing us a dearth of talent. It's not showing you that there's issues. Just like a player, a referee can have a good game, a player can have a good game, a player can have a poorer game. So let's see the trend over the next few weeks. And as the season develops, you'll notice by the appointments who's been doing well and who's not. It's just like a player, though. They'll be in the starting 11, then they'll be out. So let's just hope it's just a one-off and move on.
That's all for Get Involved Referee this week. We'll see you next time.